Welcome, everyone, to the February 16th edition of Signals from Mars. I'm your host, Victor, and we have once again, an extravagant group of cavalierish gentlemen from around the world. We have Ed Ferguson in Kentucky, Metal Dan in California, Anthony Mackie in Ireland, and we have Brad Dahl in Idaho. Everyone is doing great tonight. This is
I just realized that my hair is not ready for this show, so I'm going to put a hat on.
Yeah, we noticed that.
I'm going to put a hat on. Yeah, here we go.
Wow.
What do we think of this?
Look at that. First of all, the logo is stupendous. Thanks to
The logo is brilliant.
He doesn't take well to me saying thank you a million times to him, but I can't thank him enough for all his help making that logo look respectable and cool. So
I just took what was there and tweaked it.
Cool.
There you go. Quick story about this hat. My son was here for almost a week, and he was on his way driving home. He lives in Utah, a couple hours away. And he called me about halfway there, and he goes, oh, I forgot to say something to you. He says, I was in your office, and I saw this bucket hat in there, the Signals from Mars bucket hat. He says, man, that thing's fire. Like, so there you go, guys.
There you go.
Yeah,
if you want the bucket hat.
I told him it's not a bucket hat. It's a Brad hat.
Brad hat. There you go. Brad is sporting several pieces of merch. He's also sporting the
I got the Speedo on too.
You can find that.
He has a Speedo.
Speedo, no.
He has panties.
Signals from Mars in the front, and it's signals from Uranus in the back.
Oh, boy. There you go. But anyway,
like
Mars.com and click on merch. You'll find that and a bunch of other cool things as well. Joining us is also Sean Richmond in the chat. Sean, thanks for joining us. Sean's been providing us with some pretty cool videos these last few weeks, and I did a new walk and talk for the Victor M. Ruiz podcast, which I hopefully will be posting after we record this tonight. But tried some new lapel mics that I picked up, and I was mentioning how it's cool to get that type of feedback from you guys if there are bands that you guys are checking out and enjoy and think that the others might enjoy. It's another reason to join us on Patreon, and we're sharing a bunch of different bands and tracks that we enjoy, and as well as some of the other stuff that I've been posting lately. So tonight's episode is a return to the hour one format, where we're going to be talking about a bunch of cool topics, some buzzworthy topics, and just some things that have come up over the last few days that at least one or two of these topics are things that I'm sure either one or multiple of us have been discussing or have come to mind. Metal Dan, obviously. Metal Dan waits for me to discuss a lot of these things on the Patreon show, so we're kind of throwing some new stuff at him here today, but his comments are always welcome. So first thing that I did want to talk about is AC/DC announcing tour dates. And they're going to be hitting my neck of the woods in May. And as of a few hours ago, they've announced a second date on June 1st. But AC/DC finally announcing what we've been expecting, for 2 years now? Power Up came out 2 years ago at this point. So I guess they're finally going to do some touring here. Anthony, you had some interesting comments on Patreon saying that you got to see them a few years ago already.
Oh, I've seen AC/DC 6 times, I think, at this stage. So I was in two minds about going this time, because they've announced Dublin, and in a great big football stadium, which is where I saw them last time, in a different football stadium, and didn't really enjoy the experience. So I was in two minds about going again. And look, the short story is I ended up getting 2 tickets. Not at. I suppose I'll tell you the long story. Tickets went on sale today, and they sold out in minutes. Of course,
Wow.
like
Right.
80,000. Like,
Wow.
and but on Thursday, a link was circulating the internet, which allowed you to get tickets on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And I got this link, and I thought, well, I might as well try. And so I didn't think it would work, but it did work, and I was able to get tickets at the price that they were on sale for.
Okay.
And the seat that I was offered, because I went for a seat because my health's not what it was usually, and the seat that I was offered was very good. So I was like, oh, you got this fucking Ticketmaster countdown going in the corner, and you're like, oh Jesus,
The pressure.
it's still expensive. Do I really want to go? Blah blah. And I ended up just going, fuck it, yeah. And it was a good job I did, because those same tickets are now going for like 400, because the dynamic pricing kicked in. So, I got one for, I don't even want to say how much for, but they're going for many times that now. And it's a few months away. We'll see, So I'm going anyway.
Is that the band that you've seen the most over the years, Anthony?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That would be Marillion, probably. But or even King's X I've seen quite a few times, because I've traveled to see them multiple nights in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas AC/DC I've just seen every time they've been to Ireland since 91.
Okay.
Which is 7 times. Will be 7 times. No, they were here before that, but I was too young.
Right.
But it's hard to know what this one's going to be like, really. It's with basically Angus and Brian.
Angus and Brian, yeah. I'm just realizing that I gave Mike Jones the wrong time.
Oh. And, two of my favorite things about AC/DC are Malcolm and Phil.
Right.
So obviously neither of them are there.
It is different without Phil, for sure.
Definitely.
Well, of course, Malcolm. I mean, that, yeah. But
last time I saw them,
being alive, I'm saying it's different without.
Yeah. Last time I saw them was with Stevie, and it's different. Like, the feel is different.
It is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Slayer without Dave. It doesn't have the same snap to it.
Yeah.
Or
the same groove.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
This must have been a recent realization for the band. A lot of bands these days put tickets on sale that are like 16 months out before the event happens. And if it's happening this year, you must not have known last year.
Sorry, Dan.
The tickets just went on sale, you said, and the event's coming up this year?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Metallica, Maiden, etc. I can go on. Those tickets went on sale 16 months ago.
Yeah.
So AC/DC must have just figured out, hey, let's do this. Maybe they weren't feeling as well to do it last year, and now they're like, well, we better get it in now. So that's thinking.
Yeah, maybe they're they're feeling good, and I thought, well, we mightn't feel great in a year's time, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it probably has a lot to do with just the demand, because with them playing at Power Trip, I think it made a lot of people expect that they would be announcing something right after, because a lot of those bands did do that. Like you mentioned, Dan, Judas Priest announced stuff, Maiden announced stuff right after that festival, and AC/DC didn't. Um, they're lucky enough that their last few tours, at least in Europe, have all been stadium tours, and they've all sold well. So I'm gathering the fact that it's a combination of both things. And think of this with their last, at least with Power Up. Power Up, they announced the single, the album was out like in a month. You know, there aren't too many bands that can do that without a big, huge, as you're saying, build up to try to sell stuff. Even Metallica did that. Metallica released 3 singles before the album came out. AC/DC did the one, and then the album was out in a few weeks. I guess they're just they're gauging that their diehards are gonna, you know, pull up to the register and buy, and whether it's an album, whether it's tickets. That's my best guess.
Oh, yeah, that's true. They do not need much lead-in time for it. They know people are going to buy those tickets. So
Yeah.
It's funny. I wanted this third time I saw them was on the Stiff Upper Lip. No, it wasn't that. It was Ball Breaker, and the venue was only half full. It was really weird. You know, this is the same venue that they could a few years earlier, Razor's Edge tour. My God, it was unbelievably packed. It was the most exciting gig I was ever at. You know.
Wow. Yeah, I saw them on the Ball Breaker tour as well. I don't know. I know that a lot of people were down on that album, although I enjoy that album. So
I like it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty solid. Joining us is Mike Jones as well. I messed up the time, and for some reason you said 6 o'clock, and I said, yeah, it's 6. Sounds good. And then as we're talking here, I'm thinking, why isn't he logging in? Oh, shit, I gave him the wrong time. That's why. So I apologize.
That's okay.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up, the fact that Chris Chaney has been announced as the bass player for the European tour. It's possible that, as Mike mentioned, that Duff McKagan will be their bass player for the American tour. Now, I'm not sure if GNR is going to be touring at all. If they are, I would have a hard time thinking that he would give up that gig to play for AC/DC, because he's going to be making a lot less money playing with AC/DC than he would with GNR, because, I mean, let's face it, they're selling that tour based on him and Slash and Axl being together, you know? So I don't know. The other thing that I brought up that you guys just talked about, I mentioned this on the VMR podcast, which I'll post later, is the whole Phil Rudd thing. We all know that, I mean, Matt is now their 4th official drummer. After Phil, they went to Simon Wright and Chris Slade, and now Matt Lang, I guess his name is, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, it's not that hard to play his parts. I don't buy that, because Phil has a certain feel to his playing, and I think Simon did it well. I think Chris Slade did it okay. But I'm just thinking he's not touring because he may not be legally able to tour, because let's not forget this fucker went to jail for having a meth lab and trying to kill somebody. I mean, he was trying to order a hit on someone. So
what's more rock and roll than that?
He sounds like a character.
the videos from Power Trip, the guy that they're having, whatever his name is, Mutt Lang, he was good, you know. He was no Phil, but he was pretty good.
Well, and I'm assuming that he's got some association to the band at this point. Well, then again, yes and no, because Chris Chaney, I mean, outside of Jane's Addiction, has been more or less a session player for a lot of different people. So, I mean, he's going to be a solid player. He's not going to. Let's put it this way: they're not just hiring anybody to fill in the blanks. They're getting seasoned professionals that are going to make sure that A, they know their role within the company, and B, do a good job of it. I mean, they're obviously not just getting some dude that's covering AC/DC at a bar at this point. So
I can't imagine Angus knows who Jane's Addiction are. You know,
I don't know. That's always when you hear about stuff like that. It always kind of surprises you. There was something that came up the other day where Jimmy Page had shown up to see some band in London.
I saw that, yeah.
And I don't remember what band it was, and it was like a younger band, and it was kind of like, how the fuck does he know who this band is, you know? Or listening to the Metallica podcast, Bob Rock was saying how he ran into Jimmy Page, and Jimmy Page telling him that he thought that that Saint Anger was a brilliant album. And you think, wait, how's Jimmy Page listening to Saint Anger? You know, stuff like that just kind of throws you for a loop.
Well, what I mean is, I'm sure that they would know him more through his session work than
right. I would think that's
sort of a professional relationship rather than going for the guy in Jane's Addiction.
Right. Because again, he's like the third or fourth bassist to pass through Jane's Addiction, so it's not So it's probably when their most steady guy. Outside of Anthony, who's already gotten tickets, if they announce U.S. dates, would any of you guys venture to go see the band?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely would.
Yeah, I'd go to SoFi or Rose Bowl or this Coliseum or wherever they're going to stick them. Yeah.
Okay. Ed, you?
I don't know. I have a hard time, as much as I love AC/DC. I have kind of a hard time when I watch them, and especially Angus in his old age, because he was such fire before, younger, running, 4 miles a show back and forth across the stage. And now I think he just kind of has to carefully walk around. And it's one of those things to where I'd be excited to be there and see it. But there's also, it's just without that energy of what you remember the way it used to be. Sometimes I like to just keep it to my records once they get to a certain age.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, we've said the same thing about Rob Halford. He's kind of boring on stage too, but I guess it depends on the ticket prices. I mean, if they're going to charge $500 to get in, no, I'm not going.
Yeah, the price would make a big difference for me too.
Yeah.
If it was, like I said, easy to go, no problem. But I probably wouldn't pay a lot to go see that, being the age that they are. I'd probably rather buy a ticket like I did that last Kiss show. I just bought a ticket and watched it here at the house on my big screen TV with my stereo.
Yeah.
And cheap beer in the fridge,
There you go. Brad, what about you? Would you go see AC/DC?
Being that I've never seen them, I kind of feel like I should. So I'll take a look at the dates and see if any of it makes sense for me. And I will seriously consider it.
Would them playing with Duff sweeten the deal for you?
No, not at all. No, if I'm not the bass player, then I don't care who is.
I'd want that job.
I would do a really good job. I've played plenty of AC/DC songs with other bands, and I feel like I do them justice, and would be very true to the spirit of the song. But enough about me. Yeah, I really like to see them, and the beauty of seeing them, never seeing them before, is unlike Ed. I wouldn't be sitting there going, "Oh, geez, look at him." It wouldn't be like when I saw the first Kiss reunion and how disappointed I was in that, mostly because of Peter Criss, and he was just awful, and Ace was kind of lethargic too. And it was very disappointing because I remember what it was like in 75, 76, seeing them, and how just, every piston was firing and everything was just right. So, I think for like Anthony, who's seen them quite a few times, and he's going to see them again, it'll be interesting to hear what he thinks. If he thinks it was worth it, and if he loves it and enjoys it. And if he does, that's awesome. I mean, to me, maybe it's all more about the songs than it is the prancing around stage. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to check out the Power Trip footage, so
yeah, that's good.
It's good. Is Angus just like a lot more calmer than
he
in
is?
The past? Is that the thing, Ed?
Yeah, I think he's, from what I've seen, video wise, he's. I don't see him doing any of the moves he used to make. I mean, and of course, it's not his fault. He's getting old. You can't help it.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just hard sometimes to watch it happen. But I mean, still, it would be awfully cool to be there in a arena in a good spot, with the big sound system, listening to those big power chords of those old songs. But God, what a band I'll really miss.
I think Angus is aging quite gracefully.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Does he still do the mooning?
I don't know.
Nobody.
I've been wanting to ask someone. I wonder at what age he quit doing that.
Yeah.
He probably still does it. I thought the Power Trip stuff, he looked really good, and I thought he was playing really well. And I thought the band sounded good. I thought Brian was on point, and I don't know. I thought it was pretty cool. So it's not like you're seeing a band that's really sucking.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Another big tour announced that I know is kind of a little left fieldish for the usual. Here on Signals from Mars is Pearl Jam. Was also announced dates in July here in Spain. Any interest in seeing them? I know they're a band that mixes it up quite a bit and plays fairly long shows, even covers Van Halen from time to time. So anyone interested in seeing Pearl Jam at all?
No, I saw them once back on the Versus tour, and was so thoroughly underwhelmed at that point. That I think Eddie Vedder's vocals, because of the way that he sort of slurs his words and doesn't really enunciate, it definitely does not come across well live for me. So I wouldn't kick down for a ticket on that myself. Although that first single is a lot more rocking, very impressive. I'll give them that. But to me, they're more of a studio band than a live band.
Yeah, that's interesting as well, because Mike McCready's been saying that this is going to be a quote unquote heavier, more rocking album, and this is a guy that has a UFO cover band and a Kiss cover band, and he's always been saying that he wants to bring more guitars back in the Pearl Jam, which those first two albums had it, but after that the songwriting started to get channeled through Eddie Vedder and kind of went in a different direction. So I don't know. For me, it's similar. Well, the new date that they announced for AC/DC is going to be a Saturday. So that makes it a little bit more feasible. But the Pearl Jam dates are in the middle of when I'm going to be busy as shit. So I don't think I'll be getting out there. But there are a bunch of other good acts that are going to be hitting here. The day that we actually set off for the States, speak about an eclectic lineup. It's going to be Scorpions with Bad Religion, Royal Blood, and a bunch of other bands, but they're all like mixed within the heavier side of rock, more or less. It was kind of a cool mix, but I'll be flying. There's a few other tours of note, but yeah, those are the ones that come to mind right now. Also announced earlier this week is that Ozzy, as a solo artist, is amongst the nominees for this year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And the list is Mary J. Blige, Mariah Carey, Cher, Dave Matthews Band, Eric B. and Rakim, Foreigner, Peter Frampton, Jane's Addiction, Kool and the Gang, Lenny Kravitz, Oasis, Sinead O'Connor, the aforementioned Ozzy, Sade, and A Tribe Called Quest. The biggest thing to me out of this whole list is that after 2 years of having Iron Maiden mentioned, or at least being in the running, that they're completely gone from this list is the first thing that comes to mind. Second, is Ozzy as a solo artist more important than Maiden, more important than Motorhead, for example? I'm not saying that Ozzy shouldn't be there eventually if we're going to give any credence to this thing, but to say that they kind of overstep a lot of these other artists that I mentioned, to me is kind of a hard pill to swallow, even without getting into some of the other acts that are nominated. Ed, what do you think? Out of hard rock and metal bands that could be going in, do you think Ozzy as a solo artist deserves to be in there before others?
I don't know, man. I hadn't thought about that till you brought that up just now. That's a good point. I feel like they're going to probably make it work for Ozzy because it's obvious he's getting to the end. Mm-hmm. And, the media is going to milk the right moments for all the views and money they can. So I wouldn't be surprised if it somehow happens. But, and I would love for him to. It would be great for him to experience that before something were to happen to him to where he couldn't.
Right.
But no, I don't know if there was anyone that you could say might be that great. Wouldn't it be him? If any one solo artist could be on that level of greatness, it would probably be him, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just out of album sales,
you make a good point.
Yeah, it would be hard to. It would be hard within this genre, because I mean, do you get into the argument of, is Bon Jovi a solo band? They've sold a ton more than Ozzy. Is what Bon Jovi has done, is that more important than what Ozzy has done? Ozzy obviously has sold more than, let's say, Dio, from that side of things. But is this more of, Ozzy, the guy that was on the Osbournes, more than Ozzy, the guy that actually worked with Randy Rhoads? Mm-hmm. Are we getting nominated for this because of the first album and really nothing else is going to be mentioned, which is historically kind of how things have gone. The other thing, because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to me has always had like an underlying, like something, they've always been trying to stir shit and get some, more attention on them, is them nominating Ozzy just so that they can be the last people to say, oh, well, we had Ozzy perform his last show.
Mm-hmm. That's it right there, I think.
So that could be one of these things. One of the reasons why they're doing it. Dan, what do you think? Does Ozzy as a solo artist deserve to go in before other hard rock and metal acts?
He deserves to go in before Motorhead. Ozzy over Motorhead. Maiden doesn't. They don't care. So Ozzy over Maiden. And I don't think you're going to get Ozzy performing at the show. He doesn't have to. So he's going to do those upcoming events, hopefully, in England, and he's going to be done. He doesn't owe the Hall of Fame any performance. If they nominate him and put him in, good on them. They should do that. He doesn't owe him a performance.
Okay. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he, as a solo artist, he kind of made his bones in Sabbath, and his influence comes from Sabbath. He did have the 2 Randy Rhoads albums, but outside of that, I think that's more a Randy Rhoads influence than an Ozzy influence on the genre as a whole. So I don't feel like he deserves it over other bands.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we all know the Hall of Fame is a joke. They don't like metal. They need to change the name to just the Music Hall of Fame or the Pop Music Hall of Fame or something,
right,
to better reflect what they're actually doing.
Yeah, and this, to be honest with you, a few months ago when Sharon started talking about the fact that Ozzy deserved to go in as a solo artist, I figured that this would be something that would come up, and apparently it has. They've already gotten Randy in there previously, so I mean, to me, it seems like they've got some type of influence over the Hall. Anthony, you're in a country that doesn't give a shit about any of this stuff.
And I don't give a shit about this.
I'm here and I don't give a shit.
Yeah. This means nothing. I've got nothing to add to this conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Brad, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, obviously Ozzy hasn't contributed enough to the world of rock and roll as, let's say, Mary J. Blige, Mariah Carey, Cher. I mean, really, these other people are much more deserving to represent rock and roll than Ozzy.
Good answer.
Oh, when is Kansas getting in? All right, I'm going to be part of the grassroots effort to get Kansas in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, I hear that Mary J. Blige, Cher, and Mariah Carey are going to be recording an album of Kansas covers.
Who could blame them? Here's the funny thing, Victor, is that, and I don't know how this is happening, but Kansas keeps coming up on my YouTube feed, and I'm like, are they listening to this show?
You keep talking about them, so it's obvious that they're the most important rock band, American rock band,
American rock band. Yes,
it's all your browser searches. You can't let it go. So the cookies in there, and it's what you're really looking at. It's okay. You can come out and admit it with us.
See, I think Kansas needs to do like a combination thing with Eric B and Rakim. I think that would be just magic and fire the whole thing.
There you go. They can back Eric B and Rakim up on It Takes Two.
Yeah. Wait, is that one of their songs?
It is. It is their biggest song.
Well, I don't. Would I know it if I heard it? That's the real question. That was the game we played during the Super Bowl. It's like, okay, whoever hears a song that they've heard before gets a prize. And it didn't happen until the last song. It's like, hey, we've all heard that song, and we don't know what it is.
I would gather to say that at Chavez Ravine, you've heard It Takes Two.
Really? Okay, I'll see if Nathan's heard of this. Enough about those guys, though. I'm sure they're magic and brilliant, and the whole thing, and they've moved the whole genre of rock and roll forward.
Metal dance.
Yeah. I think Ozzy should. In our world, Ozzy's huge, and he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. So there. Okay.
Metal Dan. So let me ask you this: you were saying who before, who after Ozzy? Let me ask you this then: does Ozzy deserve to be in there before Motley Crue?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
And I was speaking of the Super Bowl that we're not allowed to say that word, or I'm gonna get fined. I was surprised that when they did the intro for the Niners, they played Metallica, "For Whom the Bell Tolls." I was like, "Fuck yeah, we have come a long way, people."
That's the only way Metallica will ever be involved in the Super Bowl, unfortunately, because even though they play the shit out of their music during every like sporting event in North America,
yeah,
the people behind the Super Bowl are still too stupid to understand their pull and their popularity, and that I'll bring this up in a second because there's another topic that I didn't mention that I wanted to bring up that I saw a known musician post about. So anyway, so real quickly here, you said that Ozzy over Motley Crue. So okay, what about Slayer?
absolutely. Ozzy is should be respected. He's a mainstream musician, deserves all the accolades he gets. He is a god. Ozzy's the best. So, Ozzy is a solo artist and all that. Absolutely, he's the best.
Okay. There we go. All right. So the other thing that I wanted to mention was that Rick Fox, who has played in Wasp, played in Steeler and a few other bands, made a post today on Facebook, which was an old post of Jakey Lee saying how Ozzy wanted to make sure that everyone that played with him had a certain look about them and that they couldn't look like someone who was in the crowd. And I think I was smart enough to not respond to the post because the first thing that came up to me instantly, the first thing that came to mind, because what Rick had said was that something to the effect of, well, you can't just have a bunch of people on stage in jeans and t-shirts. Judas Priest don't go up there with jeans and t-shirts. And my first thought was, well, if Jake had remembered, there was this band called Metallica that opened up on a tour for Ozzy. And I think they did pretty well for themselves going up there and playing in jeans and t-shirts for pretty much for their entire career. I think it has more to do with the music than it actually has to do with the image, because if it was really about that, then Ozzy wouldn't have taken the ultimate sin out of circulation because he was wearing Mrs. Roper's muumuus on stage for that tour. So again, I don't buy this whole argument that, oh, I grew up in an era where you had to look like Bowie or you had to look like Kiss or you had to look like, yeah, I think there are a few bands that made it work without having to look extravagant on stage. And that's not to say that Metallica didn't have cool stage settings, because we knew on Master of Puppets, they had the crosses, they had other shit going on. But I think the music is what ultimately connected with their fan base. So I don't buy the whole thing that, oh, the artists have to look like otherworldly. They can't look like people that are in the crowd. If your music sucks, you're not connecting with anybody, regardless of what you look like. And I can mention a ton of bands that were all about the image that couldn't do it. So I know that this drives Anthony nuts when we talk about Kiss. But
because he loves them so much.
Is there any band at all that comes to mind where the image instantly grabs you and that's what made you get into their music first?
I'm going to say Maiden. And when I say the image, I don't mean because they wear some pretty awful clothes, but, the covers, Eddie is what got a lot of people into Maiden. So you could say that, but that's not really what you mean.
Right, but I mean, even to your point, because a lot of people bring up the fact, even if we go the other way, where if we want to talk about what the thrash bands were wearing, a lot of people don't admit to the fact that Maiden was wearing spandex for a really long time on stage. A lot of people won't cop to the fact that there were a few guys in thrash bands wearing spandex on stage. Lars Ulrich, Tom Hunting, Dave Lombardo. It was fucking easier for them to play in spandex for they were sweating their nuts off. So it made more sense for them to wear that than it was for them as drummers to wear jeans on stage. So, I mean, I think that on both sides of the argument, people get too hung up on the image thing. And
But
to go
so
ahead.
I kind of lost track of the initial post. Was it that this guy said that you couldn't play in Ozzy's band or you couldn't play on stage in general?
It was the Jakey Lee quote came from the fact that you couldn't play in Ozzy's band
Oh, in
without
Ozzy's band. Okay.
yeah. But then Rick took it further with saying that, you know, to get on stage, you needed to look like a rock star.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
Mike, what do you think about this subject?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely bands that, the image goes hand in hand with the music, and it helps, I think, from a marketing standpoint to draw you in. But I've seen plenty of bands live that just came out in jeans and t-shirts, shorts, what have you, and completely melted my face, as well as bands that were, fully decked out with elaborate stage shows. Your King Diamond, Merciful Fate, Alice Cooper, the over the top shock rock type bands. The image is important to them, but I can listen to the music all day too and not need the visuals. So yeah, I think the music is really the most important part of it.
Yeah. Okay. Dan, how about you?
When you're young and influential, yeah, the image can grab you and make you a fan. Thinking of myself as 20 years old, probably seeing Britney Fox and going, oh, wow, or I don't know who else. Maybe seeing Slayer and going, oh, those guys look something, so I'm going to check them out. So that could be, but at an older age, no. So to answer your question.
Okay. Ed?
I think that imagery can be a nice enhancement to the whole package of what you're trying to present, like especially in a concert, but it can also kind of pigeonhole you.
Mm-hmm.
If you come out, if you're playing in the jeans and t-shirts, you kind of you look like you could be playing many genres of rock music and your image would fit.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a new wave band, it would look weird if you came out and started playing death metal. It'd be kind of cool to see it too. It's fun to see the clashes, of styles, but you know what I mean. So I'm all for imagery, but imagery also can make me laugh at you pretty hard, which was something that happened a lot in the 80s. It just makes you look silly. But that also has to do a lot with just fashion and times, the things we like coming and going, and it all happens so fast that something's really cool one minute and then the next minute you're laughing about it.
Yeah, I like Steve Harris's was a blue and white spandex. Everybody thought those were the coolest. Yeah, and I wore spandex on stage when I was playing, and now I look back and think that was pretty stupid. I did it.
But Maiden, even though they had the spandex, they still had the metal look. They were wearing the leather and everything along with it. Later on, though, those bands, hard rock bands, they made themselves look more girly, I guess. And it was just like who could look more and more like that to the point where it just became silly. It was like who could have the biggest hair. It's weird.
Who could have the biggest wig?
Yeah.
The biggest ego.
Yeah, I wore spandex, but then I just used a t-shirt or a thin thing, so I wasn't totally glammed out.
You have a picture of that, Metal Dan?
Yeah, I don't want to share that.
I'd like to see that.
Come on,
Thanks.
just share it with us.
I really want to see that.
Me too.
I'm not going to forget. Get back to you on that.
Brad, what do you think? Have you ever worried? Have you ever worried about your image when you get up and play on stage?
Actually, well, no. Yeah, I feel like you should look like you didn't just get off work at Radio Shack. Okay. Yeah. Because I've seen bands like that where they walk out, and even if they are kind of good, you're still like, geez, guys, at least throw some kind of effort in there to, look cool. Some guys are just cool no matter what. But a lot of these guys aren't cool and they look uncool, but it's like, yeah, the song's pretty good, but usually they're not killing it. I'm trying to think of somebody that, actually I can't think of one band that I saw when they walked on stage. It was like, what the hell is this? It was Bebop Deluxe, 1976, warming up for Blue Oyster Cult. And, back then it was the era of where you had the big, coming on stage music and lights out, and then everything would boom and the lights would go on and you'd be playing your song. These guys walked out with the lights on and said, we need to tune up. So bear with us for just a moment. And so they all stood there and tuned up, and then they just killed it. They just slayed. And they're wearing these really cheap polyester suits. If you look at the Modern Music album on the back, you can see that. I mean, that was what they were going for. So they're all wearing the same really bad polyester suits. They look like crap, but they killed it and made a fan out of me. So yeah, it's not everything, but I don't know. I try to not look like like I just got off work at Radio Shack when I play. I don't get too dolled up though.
Well, that just makes you look like you're part of a new wave band.
I've done that kind of, yeah. I've worn my band in the 80s. I mean, we used to shop women's clothes because the dudes' clothes just weren't, colorful enough, weren't hip enough. The shoulder didn't have the shoulder pads, and
picture of that.
Yeah, I wish. I wish I had. Why are there no pictures of this stuff, guy? We actually look pretty cool, yeah, if I had a picture, I'd share. I'll look around. I've got pictures of me from the 70s, and my problem there is I always wanted black pants, but they didn't make black pants for men in the mid 70s. So all I could get is dark blue corduroys, which, can you imagine thinking that was cool? And a black T-shirt, so black and blue, which I was like, God, why can't I get black pants? That's what I was going for. I was going for all black, and then I kind of morphed into the red and the black. And yeah, those were the days. But I can pop up stuff from the 70s. Yeah.
All right. So next topic here is Super 7 is releasing a new set of figures, Motley Crue from the Shout at the Devil era. And now all this talk about the different wardrobes that everyone had at one point in time or another. I think I'm going to have to reach out to Super 7 and see if we can make Signals from Mars patrons figures. We could have Dan in spandex shorts and t-shirt. We have Brad and his shoulder pads.
Brad has.
We could see if that would sell. I don't know if any of you guys are fans of what Super 7 has been doing over the years with some of these figures that they've been releasing.
Right there.
Oh, you've got a few. Okay.
We've got a whole collection.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it is kind of neat that they've gone and released kind of stuff that isn't, overly popular. Or not overly popular, but some of the Rob Halford stuff or some of the Maiden stuff has been kind of cool.
Yeah.
Oh, you got Steve Snyder. Okay.
With his big meat bone.
Wait, was that Doro?
Mr. Rob Halford.
Rob Halford.
Wow. Have they got the Kerry Livgren one?
King Diamond.
King Diamond. Okay.
Well done.
Okay.
And King Edward.
There you go. Somewhere in Time, Eddie. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So
I have
I
the
like it.
NECA stuff. That's very close. The NECA maiden figures.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Those are cool.
Nice.
That's pretty neat. Yeah. And they actually just announced a Cliff Burton, which looks pretty neat. There's some of the Super 7 figures look pretty spot on with the original, and there are others that seem like they're almost like a knockoff. Brad and his Godzilla, Mothra, and the Japanese monster figures. It's interesting because for a lot of bands, this type of stuff was almost like taboo for such a long time, and for some of them, it just seems like now the opportunity of a company coming along and wanting to do this stuff with them has kind of propelled other bands to do it, like you're seeing with the Neko stuff or even the Knucklebone stuff, where they have some pretty expensive shit with Slayer figures or Ozzy and Slash and stuff like that, which with them, with Knucklebones, there's like it's $200 per figure. So it's not exactly cheap, but the detail is pretty cool. I mean, it's obviously just for diehards. This isn't stuff that you can. I mean, for as much as a band like Kiss has received shit for a lot of their merch, I think at this stage of the game, all of these figures that are being released are for diehards. They aren't being made specifically for kids, let's say. So, because a lot of the stuff isn't cheap. But Ed, are you fine with bands releasing this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it's cool.
Okay. Dan, you've actually got the Eddie you just showed us, so you're down for the cause?
Yeah, absolutely. I have no problem with that. I just don't understand how people can worship a political figure and do the same thing. So for that, it is normal for me. It's not like, back in the day to play with or anything like that, but there's this little knick-knack shit to have around. And then once you start, then you kind of have to finish it. But yeah, when you get into that $200 range, that's too much, and I don't. So it's kept within a premium of don't price me out, and I'll buy it.
Yeah. I've got a bunch of Funkos behind me, mostly Maiden. There's an Eddie Van Halen. There's a few other like movie characters and stuff like that, but it's similar. I mean, if any of this stuff is overly expensive, I don't bother checking it out. And some of the Super 7 stuff I wanted to pick up. I wanted to get the original Cliff Burton they released, which was pretty cool looking, but the figure cost a lot and the shipping was like twice as much as what the figure was. So I missed out. Anthony, what do you think about this type of merch?
I think it's fine. I mean, I wouldn't buy it. But, I say that, and, people say that, and then suddenly they release something that you like, and you're like, oh, maybe I do want these things,
Yeah.
Like, I'm just looking at some of those ones that Mike had are pretty cool,
Yeah.
And, like, I wouldn't get one. Next thing, they release one of Doug Pinnick back in the, peak Doug Pinnick with his mohawk, and I'm like, oh my god, I want that. So
that or Funko's based on the first few Marillion albums.
Well, Funko's might be pushing it a bit, but I'd rather see bands doing little kind of fairly faithful models than whiskey or beer, which I think is a bit tacky. But
I'd like to have one of Lemmy that I would put up there on my bourbon shelf. That would be cool.
A Lemmy what, drink or
no, a figurine like that?
Yeah, there are Super 7 Lemmys, and
is there? I'm going to have to buy one of those.
It's a slippery
and then I need to find the I need to find the Jack Daniel's Lemmy whiskey, and then that figurine. It's gonna make me spend money. That's cool.
Oh, look at that!
Ace
It's a
of
slippery
spades.
slope, man. You start buying them.
That's the
I
problem.
know that's one problem with doing that. That's right. It's
Yeah.
hard to stop.
Wow.
Exactly.
You have to make sure that you go into it and know that you've got a limit. Because that is
Know your limits. Yeah.
know
It's
your
like
limit.
gambling. Yeah,
Because I
you have
have right next to that, I have it's the first 4 Maiden covers in one box, and then of course they released Seventh Son on its own, and they released Somewhere in Time, so I had to get those as well. Thankfully, the rest that they released kind of didn't interest me, so I was able to stop with the Maiden ones. But the Eddie Van Halen came out, and I'm like, oh wow, I got to get the Eddie Van Halen, and now they've got one with him with the shark guitar, which is a limited edition. And because it was ridiculously expensive, I didn't pick it up. But if not, that would have been up there as well. So
This week I got a Spinal Tap set from my friend I told you about that died last month. I went to his house and was starting to collect his stuff. His family wants me to get his stuff out of there. And he's got, of course, his are much taller. They're probably, and they're a little bit beat up, but that'd be kind of fun to clean up. I'll show you here next time we meet. I'll pop them out. And, and I think in a dime bag, maybe one small dime bag that I'm going to have to bring home too. That'd be cool.
Cool. The dime bag may actually be the knuckle bones that I mentioned, which are on the pricier side.
Yeah, I'll have some. I'll be able to show some of his stuff to you guys throughout the year. He had some cool things in his collection.
Cool. Be down for that. Last topic here of the night, and kind of ties into the Motley Crue figure thing, which surprisingly they're releasing this with Mick Mars.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, you got to go with the Shout at the Devil. You have to go with one of the first few iconic albums, and that one obviously had a specific look about them. Obviously, Mick is getting his cut, but so soon after litigation and everything else, just interesting to see that was, I'm assuming, in the works for a long time. The last topic is Mick himself as a player. He was asked if he felt that he is an underrated player from the 80s. Do you guys feel that he was underrated for his work? And one of the first things that's come to mind with me, specifically since revisiting a lot of the early Motley Crue stuff recently, obviously Mick isn't Yngwie, let's say. He's not Eddie Van Halen, but I think that especially on those first few Motley Crue albums, he was a tasty enough player to know how to make his solos work within the confines of the songs to release memorable solos. I mean, think about solo for Looked at Kill or even Home Sweet Home, stuff like that, where they're memorable and they don't have a million notes to them. They're totally part of those songs. And I think if you hear those songs with any other solo in there without the kind of meat and potatoes of what he did, I mean, I haven't heard them with John 5 playing them, but I would imagine that John 5 is sticking close to those originals just because of that. Ed, you're obviously a guitarist. Mick Mars, underrated for the 80s, or do you think he got the correct amount of recognition for what his playing was all about?
Yeah, I think he stands on his own in a way because he's different. I've never heard a single guitarist say anything negative about Mick. I mean, and he wasn't doing the shredding thing that a lot of players were back then. Although when he first started, there wasn't a ton of shredders either.
Right.
I mean, you had Eddie Van Halen starting it, but like I've said before on this show, you know, he's got his own tone that you can almost feel like it's in his hands,
Right.
that no one else can replicate. And like we talked about before, and you just said, his solos are super well done. They're memorable. You can sing them from memory.
Yeah.
He stands alone, or he stands on his own as a great player. And there's, even though he's not shredding like an Eddie Van Halen, he was still an awesome player, and everybody, I think every guitarist really respects him highly.
I think that's a good point too. That, I mean, if you set Eddie apart, you put Mick in with a Vivian Campbell, with a George Lynch, with a Warren DeMartini, because I think that would probably be the next group of guys
Yeah,
that
he was more in
instantly
there.
come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would you guys think that it's fair to put him in that group, or do you think that, you know,
That's the way I think of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Dan, what do you think?
I think the reason this statement like this can come up to be even questioned is because he was the quiet one. He was the quiet Beatle. You know, he's underrated because he didn't want a lot of attention, but absolutely solid player and should get more credit than he's been given by the band. As you mentioned, you guys have all mentioned, the early days especially, his sound and his contribution to his playing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, he was the older, more mature guy in the band early on. So, you know, it's his technique and everything was probably more refined than everybody else's was at that point. And yeah, I mean, without him, you know, I don't think Motley Crue would be where they are, you know, having that kind of maturity and leadership to keep them together from, you know, all the stupid stuff that they did way back when. And yeah, it's, you know, like everybody else has said, you know, his solos were just perfect for the songs, for the time, for that time frame. And, you know, I can hear them in my head when I think of the songs note for note. And if you're not great, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I can think of some of the lesser known songs by the band where, just like you're saying, you know, you start to hear the song and some of them you kind of fast forward in your head to, oh yeah, that solo's in this song, you know. So it's, I think he's always been good at that, is, like I said, is putting a memorable notes together, you know, with the full composition to make it all work. Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah.
I've echoed what most people have said here. Mick was we're talking about him as if he's gone, but Mick is you know, he's a musician. He's not just a guitar player. That, you know, he's not only there for solos. Mick plays the song from start to finish, and, you know, let's face it. I suppose Tommy has a big impact on Motley Crue, but, you know, I can't think of any particularly memorable bass lines in Motley Crue. So, you know, he's in many ways one of the most important members of the band.
Yeah, I mean,
like
outside of the intro to Shout at the Devil and maybe Primal Scream, there really isn't any other bass track that you could think of that instantly stands out, you know, like you could mix solos.
There's some nice bass playing on the first album.
Yeah.
But look, he's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with Mick Mars.
Yeah. Brad, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to say it was the guitar that actually attracted me to their music first, being that I heard them before seeing them. Yeah, yeah, it's like, wow, that guitar, that sound is just so badass. And so, yeah, he's very important. He's really important to that band. I mean, I don't think they would have been, I guess they could have been as big without him, but we'll never know. But yeah, I think he's a great player. Great tone.
Interestingly enough, the first thing to draw me to the band was hearing the riff for "Look That Kill."
Yep.
That heavy crunchiness to that was, what is this? It was the first thing that really grabbed me.
He didn't sound like anybody else. I mean, you couldn't go, oh, he's going for what that guy's doing.
Yeah.
Not at all. It's like, this is different, and that's tough to do.
I'm trying to think about him is
yeah, it's real difficult to have your own sound, especially now, and actually be good. I guess it'd be easy to make your own sound that sounds like crap.
I think the neat thing too is from the songs we've been hearing off of the solo album. And look, the rest of the solo album could be utter shit, but the 3 songs that have been released so far sound pretty cool. They sound like what you would want to hear from him. Some heavy guitar playing, and he's not reinventing anything, but it sounds good so far. So I mean, at least it's making me look forward to what the overall album is going to sound like.
When I think about it, Mick, especially on Shout at the Devil, he had a guitar sound that when you're a kid made you start doing chores to make money to go buy a guitar.
Right.
That you hear that. My first experience was hearing Shout at the Devil, just like you were saying, that guitar sound.
Yeah.
Makes your hair stand up, and you start dreaming about buying a guitar. And you can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic for another day. Songs that made you want to work to buy your first instrument.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. Cool. So on that note, folks, I do want to thank Ed, Dan, Mike, Anthony, and Brad for joining me tonight. Also want to thank Sean, who was in the chat. And thank anyone else that may listen to or watch the replay of this. Thank you very much for your support. Remember to go to signalsfrommars.com to find all the great links to where you can follow and share on social media, subscribe, buy merch, and all that great stuff. On that note, we end tonight's show. We will see you next time right here on Signals from Mars. See you, folks.
Thank you for watching the Signals from Mars live stream. You can watch the show live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, or check out replays on YouTube. Go to signalsfrommars.com for more information. This concludes our show.